What's good, everybody? I'm Jerry. About to check out the year WWE took over the world. This video is by Wrestle Mafia. Um, 1998 is the year WWE took over the wrestling industry because they no longer were competing with WCW at the time. They actually transcended and never looked back during the Monday Night Wars. WCW had to compete and try to stay abroad and keep their head above water just to maintain good ratings, just so they wouldn't get canceled. But ultimately, I think 3 years later, WCW ended up going out of business, and Vince McMahon bought it, and the rest was history after that. Once WWE took over, the rest was history. So you're about to hop into this video and see why 1998 was the best year and the year WWE took over the world. Let's go.
A year that saw The Undertaker throw Mankind off the top of the cell. When Austin and Tyson brawled on live TV. When Kane set Taker on fire inside a casket. When the Austin-McMahon rivalry became the hottest story in pro wrestling. When DX invaded WCW. When The Rock became the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. And these are just some of the things that happened in the wild year of 1998. 1998 was the year WWF finally turned the tide in the Monday Night Wars, and the Attitude Era became a mainstream phenomenon. But what exactly made this year so explosive? What were the matches, moments, and storylines that elevated the WWF to heights it had never reached before? Let's turn back the clock and revisit the wild year when pro wrestling took over the world.
Chapter 1.
After spending the majority of 1997 chasing the WWF Championship and battling his way through the Hart Foundation, Austin entered 1998 with one clear mission: become WWF Champion and make Vince McMahon's life a living hell. The tension between Austin and McMahon had been simmering since late 1997, but this year it would explode into a full-blown war that would define both men's legacies.
World Wrestling
the Royal
Federation
Rumble
Championship
in January set the stage for this
Stone
clash. Stone Cold
time.
entered the match at number 24,
Yep.
and despite having the target of the
I think he
entire
won his
locker room
first
on his back, the Texas
Royal Rumble
Rattlesnake
that
systematically
year.
eliminated every challenger thrown his way.
Well, his
Austin's
second one.
victory guaranteed
Back
him
to
a
back.
main event spot at WrestleMania, but it also confirmed Vince McMahon's worst
That
fear.
was his second
The
one.
beer-drinking, authority-defying rebel was one step away from becoming the face of his company. McMahon couldn't stomach the idea. Austin represented everything Vince despised. But the most memorable moment of the Royal Rumble fallout came the following night on Raw, when the baddest man on the planet, Mike Tyson, made a special appearance. Tyson arrived on Raw to announce his involvement in WrestleMania as the special guest enforcer for the main event. But what happened next became one of the most iconic segments in Raw history. Stone Cold interrupted Tyson's announcement, marched down to the ring, and got directly in the face of the baddest man on the planet.
You know they had to
Austin
be
flipped
scripted.
Tyson off, trash-talked him without any fear, and sparked a brawl that had to be broken up by dozens of security guards. The segment was pure chaos.
Why
and it
nobody
brought
getting that
mainstream
close to Mike
attention
Tyson
the
doing
company.
all that
Vince McMahon was
and not
furious,
getting knocked
not
out
because
in
the
the 90s?
segment didn't work, but because Austin had once again proven he couldn't be controlled.
Yeah.
McMahon wanted a corporate champion, but Austin was the exact opposite, and the boss made it his mission to ensure the Rattlesnake never wore the WWF Championship. But despite McMahon's best efforts to stack the deck against him, Stone Cold defeated Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14 to capture his first WWF Championship.
Oh, that was his
Mike
first
Tyson,
championship?
in a shocking double cross, revealed himself to be aligned
That
with
was his first
Austin rather
reign?
than DX and raised Stone Cold's hand as the new champion. The Austin era had begun, and WWF had a champion who felt genuinely unstoppable. The night after WrestleMania, Austin made it crystal clear he had no intention of being Vince's puppet. Stone Cold delivered a stunner to McMahon and announced that nobody would ever tell him how to act or who to be. But Vince McMahon wasn't going to give up that easily. If he couldn't control Austin, he'd destroy him. Throughout the spring and summer, McMahon handpicked a series of challengers designed to take the championship away from Stone Cold. But what the boss didn't count on was that Stone Cold Steve Austin thrived in chaos. The more McMahon tried to destroy him, the more popular Austin became. He'd drive a Zamboni to the arena, hold Vince at gunpoint, and even cause the boss to pee his pants.
on himself.
However, by the summer of 1998, Austin was set to face his biggest challenge in the form of two brothers whose personal war had engulfed the entire WWF.
That was a cool storyline.
While Stone Cold was waging
I
war
never
against
watched it
corporate
back,
authority,
but
The
as far as
Undertaker
playing
and
the
Kane's
games,
supernatural saga was starting to
what was
pick up.
that,
The tension
2K16,
between the brothers had been simmering
when they
throughout
did
the
the
early
Stone
months of
Cold
the year, with Kane desperate to prove himself
showcase
superior
mode.
to The Undertaker, while the dead man remained reluctant to truly unleash his fury on his own flesh and blood. However, that all changed at the Royal Rumble when Kane interfered in The Undertaker's casket match against Shawn Michaels, costing his brother the WWF Championship. But Kane didn't just cost Undertaker the match. He locked the dead man inside the casket and set it ablaze in one of the most shocking moments in WWF history. Flames engulfed the casket as Paul Bearer cackled maniacally at ringside, and when the fire was finally extinguished, The Undertaker was nowhere to be found. For weeks, the WWF treated The Undertaker as if he'd been killed. But you can't kill what's already dead. Just days before WrestleMania, Taker made his return when lightning struck a casket on the stage. This version of Taker was different, darker, more vengeful. The usually stoic dead man now had murder in his eyes. The stage was set for their inevitable confrontation at WrestleMania 14, where the two behemoths would finally settle their differences in front of over 19,000 fans. The match itself was less about technical wrestling and more about two unstoppable forces settling the score. The Undertaker dominated much of the encounter, but Kane's supernatural resilience kept bringing him back from the brink of defeat.
Kane
In
had
the end,
this,
The Undertaker hit Kane with 3
devastating
tombstone piledrivers
looking
to finally
tombstone.
put his brother down for the 3 count.
His was like a
The
snap
victory should have
tombstone.
ended their rivalry,
Undertaker
but in the
kinda
world of the
hesitated, then he'd do
WWF,
it.
the story never ends. Throughout the spring and summer, Kane and The Undertaker's paths continued to cross. Taker even defeated Kane in the first ever Inferno match, but their relationship took on a new dimension when Vince McMahon saw an opportunity. The boss saw two 7-foot monsters who hated each other, and he realized he could weaponize that hatred against Stone Cold Steve Austin. McMahon began playing both brothers against each other while simultaneously pointing them toward the WWF champion. This created a volatile 3-way dynamic that would dominate the main event scene.
Was this around the same time
At
they
King
broke
of the Ring in
Vince's
June,
leg?
the
Or was they
tension
on the
reached a
same
breaking
page at
point
the
when
time?
Austin was forced to defend his championship against Kane. The match was pure chaos, with both The Undertaker and McMahon getting involved at various points, and it ended with Kane capturing the WWF Championship for the first time in his career. But Kane's reign would last exactly one night. The very next night on Raw, Austin invoked his rematch clause and recaptured the championship. However, while the story of Kane, Taker, and Austin was dominating the main event scene, a bigger story was brewing elsewhere on the card, which would culminate with a Deadly Game tournament at Survivor Series. The upper mid-card scene in 1998 became a proving ground where future main eventers were being forged, and 3 men in particular would use it as their launching pad to superstardom. Mankind, aka Mick Foley, had spent years establishing himself as one of the WWF's most unpredictable performers. At the Royal Rumble, Foley entered the match 3 times, as Cactus Jack, Mankind, and Dude Love. But it was his transformation into Dude Love that would define the first half of his year. Vince McMahon, desperately searching for someone who could take the WWF Championship away from Stone Cold Steve Austin, saw an opportunity in Foley. The boss believed he could mold Mankind into a corporate puppet, someone who would follow orders and serve McMahon's interests rather than his own ego. At Unforgiven in April, Dude Love pushed Austin to his absolute limit as McMahon's hand-picked challenger, but Austin still managed to walk out with the title. In the second half of the year, as a reward for Foley's loyalty, Vince McMahon bestowed a brand new title upon Mankind, the Hardcore Championship. The belt was designed specifically for Foley's brand of extreme violence, and it gave the company a way to showcase the increasingly brutal matches that had become a staple of the Attitude Era. But more importantly, it kept Mankind in Vince's pocket. Foley played along, believing that his loyalty to McMahon would eventually be rewarded with a shot at the WWF Championship. But what he didn't realize was that Vince was playing multiple angles at once, and Mankind was just a pawn in a much larger game. The Rock's evolution in 1998 represents one of the most successful character transformations in wrestling history. The fans who had once rejected Rocky as a babyface now couldn't get enough of his arrogant, trash-talking heel persona. Throughout the spring and summer, The Rock's confidence grew exponentially. His promos became must-see TV as he developed the catchphrases and electrifying presence that would eventually make him a crossover superstar. By the summer, The Rock had kicked Farouk out of the Nation of Domination and taken over as the faction's leader. But The Rock's ambition extended far beyond the Nation. He wanted the WWF Championship, and he made that desire known loudly and repeatedly. The problem was that Vince McMahon didn't trust The Rock. Despite his growing popularity and undeniable charisma, The Rock had shown too much independence, too much ego, and too much willingness to put himself first rather than following corporate directions. Throughout the fall, McMahon actively worked against The Rock, trying to keep him out of championship contention. Meanwhile, Triple H was experiencing his own transformation in 1998. After Shawn Michaels retired following WrestleMania 14, Triple H took over as the leader of D-Generation X, rebuilding the faction with X-Pac, Road Dogg, and Billy Gunn. Triple H positioned himself as a main event player throughout the year, capturing the Intercontinental Championship and engaging in high-profile feuds with The Rock and Owen Hart. But more importantly, Triple H was learning how to be a top guy, developing the psychology and presence that would eventually make him one of the company's most dominant champions in years to come. All three men, Mankind, The Rock, and Triple H, eyed the Survivor Series Deadly Game tournament with championship aspirations, but only one could leave as WWF champion.
Who was it?
Meanwhile, the Austin Kane-Taker saga had taken a wild turn. Taker had turned heel and aligned with his brother in an attempt to dethrone the Texas Rattlesnake. At Breakdown, Taker and Kane pinned Austin at the same time, leading to the title being vacated. At Judgment Day in October, Kane and The Undertaker faced off for the vacant WWF Championship with Stone Cold as the special guest referee. McMahon had threatened to fire Austin if he didn't do his job properly, but the Rattlesnake had no intention of following Vince's orders. When the match reached its conclusion, Austin refused to count the pin for either brother, instead laying both men out with a steel chair and declaring himself the winner. McMahon had no choice but to follow through on his threat and fire Austin. The firing, of course, was temporary. Within weeks, Austin had been rehired by Shane McMahon as a way for Vince's son to stick it to his father. But by then, the damage had been done. The championship remained vacant, and the company desperately needed a solution to crown a new champion.
Vince, he probably did.
Vince McMahon announced that at Survivor Series in November, a one-night tournament called the Deadly Game would determine the new WWF champion. 14 superstars would compete in a bracket-style tournament, with the finals taking place that same night. Kane and The Undertaker, having already proven they could beat Austin for the title, were both granted first-round byes. Mankind, still believing he was Vince's chosen champion, entered the tournament, and so did The Rock. However, the climax of the tournament led to one of the most shocking twists in wrestling history. In one of the most shocking betrayals of the year, Shane McMahon revealed himself to be aligned with his father all along, screwing Austin out of the tournament and sending Mankind to the finals. The Rock, meanwhile, navigated his side of the bracket by defeating Big Boss Man in the first round, Ken Shamrock in the quarterfinals, and The Undertaker in the semifinals. The finals pitted The Rock against Mankind in what appeared to be a straightforward match to crown a new champion. But Survivor Series 1998 had one more massive swerve in store. As the match reached its conclusion and Mankind appeared poised to capture his first WWF championship, The Rock turned on him and aligned with Vince McMahon. The Rock became WWF champion, but more importantly, he became the corporate champion, Vince McMahon's hand-picked golden boy who would carry the company forward as the face of corporate authority. The following weeks, The Rock explained that he didn't sell out. He bought in. He was proud to be the corporate champion, proud to align himself with the McMahon family, and completely unapologetic about betraying both the fans and Mankind to get to the top. The People's Champion had become the most hated man in the WWF, and the stage was set for his rivalry with Austin that would change the history of pro wrestling forever.
It did.
But the explosion of the Attitude Era in 1998 wasn't just about the main event scene. D-Generation X, now led by Triple H, became the embodiment of everything the Attitude Era represented. The faction's most infamous moment came when DX loaded up a military jeep, drove to the arena where WCW Nitro was being held, and attempted to invade their competition. The tag team division started undergoing a renaissance, with teams like the New Age Outlaws, the Hardy Boys, and Edge and Christian beginning to establish themselves as future stars. Val Venis almost got his chopped off. Sable became a star. The Hardcore division, anchored by Mankind's new championship, provided a chaotic element. And by the time 1998 came to a close, the WWF had completely transformed itself. The company that had been on the verge of bankruptcy just 2 years earlier was now a mainstream phenomenon. Austin, The Rock, Kane, and The Undertaker had become household names, while the next generation of stars was already being groomed for greatness. And if you want to relive all the greatness from the peak of the Attitude Era, check out this video next.
Alright, y'all, great video, man. Let me know down below in the comments of what y'all thought of my reaction to this video. Like, comment, subscribe, and tell me what you want me to react to next.